Great, good. Welcome to the first meeting of the new year, January 11th, 2018. Before we read the agenda, just want to welcome George Morrill, our newest selectman.
Thank you.
Just elected a couple days ago.
Yes.
So welcome. If we could ask our town administrator, newly rested, to read the agenda, please.
All right, thank you. First, we'll vote to approve or amend the agenda and add topics not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance. Then period of public comment. And then the first item is update memory statue restoration with Peggy Novak and Susie Wheelwright from the Historical Commission. And then an update on the Nuisance Dog Hearing held on September 27th, 2017 regarding Mr. and Mrs. Sutter, 130 Nason Hill Road. We're recommending to pull that off the agenda because they've gotten rid of the dogs. And then 2018 annual town meeting, consideration of omnibus budget and departmental budgets, Elder Housing Committee, Conservation Commission, Board of Selectmen Office, Legal, and Veterans Agent, consideration of capital items, but we don't have any of those this evening. And then consideration of town meeting warrant and various articles. There are two NOIs from the Elder Housing Committee. One is regarding FY18 supplemental funds. The other is regarding a contribution to the Capital Stabilization Fund. And then an NOI regarding the recall of elected officials. Under routine business, we have the town administrator report in consideration of payroll warrant, and then selectmen items, reports, minutes from November 28th, 2017, and then the meeting calendar. Next meetings are January 16th, 2018, and January 25th, 2018.
Okay. Anybody have anything to amend other than to take off the item number 2, the nuisance dog hearing?
I wouldn't take that off because under that item, we should describe what's happened and report that. the
That's
matters
fine.
have been moved
Yeah,
to
we
me,
can do that.
so Might as well.
Leave it on. That's why we left it on there,
It's
even though
okay.
the dog.
That's fantastic. So that's it. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? All right, the agenda's approved. Peggy and Susie, thank you for coming in, and thanks for taking this on, and we're happy to hear an update on your statue restoration. If you'd like to, just because it'll be on TV and people will be able to hear you.
Not particularly, but
10 inches from the mic, Peggy.
oh, boy. Okay. Peggy Novak, Nason Hill Road, Historical Commission. As you probably remember, last spring we applied for a grant from the Mass Historical Commission for restoration work on the memory statue and monument. We estimated the total of the work on both to be $30,400. The grant is a 50% matching grant, so we applied for $15,200. At town meeting, the town voted the full $30,400 so that we would be able to do the work even if we weren't successful in getting the grant. In June, we were notified that we had been awarded a $15,000 grant, so most of what we asked for. The project went out to bid in the fall in 2 parts, the bronze and the granite work separately. The construction documents were prepared by Lisa Howe, who's a professional conservator with Building Conservation Associates. At a site visit with her, she noted that the side walls of the monument, I've given you a sheet of paper that hopefully in red are circled the side walls in question, are not plumb. She has told us that they seem to be stable, they're not a public safety hazard, but the size of the gaps that creates will affect how long the mortar used in the repointing will last. So we included resetting those stones as an alternate in the bid document so that if pricing came in such a way that there was enough money, we could consider doing that work. The Bids for the bronze came in right where we expected, with the lowest bid at $8,300. The person who bid it is highly qualified, so that's an easy decision. The granite work received 7 bids with a very wide range from $15,810 to over $61,000 for the base work. The lowest bidder has very good references and seems to be very well qualified to do the work. He included an additional amount of $7,096 to do the work on the side walls, should we so choose. The details of the way the money lays out should be included. I think you have a sheet showing bid alternatives.
Like that.
Yep,
Is
we
that
have-
one?
Yep.
Peggy, quick question on the matching grant. Is it
Sure.
at a 50% rate of the final number, or is it simply a flat
So
15,000?
it's a 50% matching, so it's 50% of the final amount.
And that would,
Up to.
Up to.
Up to
up to
15,000.
15,000? But that would not include the additional work on these sidewalls?
Right.
So
It
it's,
would include a very small amount of it, but the way the bidding came in, the total for the base work, including the granite and the bronze, came out at $29,610.
yeah, so we're only talking a couple $100 anyway.
Right.
Yeah, thanks.
So, Mass Historic would match, would pay half of that. If we do the additional work, most of that cost would be on the town, $6,900. It would still put the total cost to the town well under the $30,400 voted at town meeting, but it's an additional amount of work, and so an additional cost to the town above the $15,000. So we're bringing it to you because you guys get the big bucks, so it's.
We have options, and we thought you
Right.
should be aware of them and should weigh in on how you want us to proceed.
Exactly.
And in fact, we need to be awarding the bids because everything keeps rolling along and there are deadlines. We're kind of, we've been allowed to let them slip a little by Massachusetts Historic, but as long as they consider that we're, going forward in a reasonable way, they're fine with that. So that's why we're here.
The next
So-
step is our recommendation on the bidding has to go to Mass Historic for their approval. There's very little question that they'll approve it since we're going with the lowest bid. We would have to justify it if we were taking a higher bid. But they have to give approval and then the contract can be awarded.
So the 5,500 administrative cost goes to Mass Historic, is that right?
No, I was just going to explain to you about that. That is something that Mass Historic requires, and what it covers is 2 things, basically. The preservation consultant, and both they and we have okayed and recommended this person so that they know that she has the qualifications to oversee the kind of work that we want to see on the statue and that you want to see and pay for. Plus a sign, like if you've noticed the library project sign, that's a state grant also. So this would we would have to have that same sort of a sign while the work is actually being done. And so that's what that,
And the $500 is their recommended amount
For the sign?
for the sign,
right.
allotted for the sign.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Town meeting appropriated 30,000, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
And with the grant, we actually have something like 45,000 of available funds. So we could take the 7,000, couldn't we, out of the town meeting appropriation without the need for any further town meeting action. Is that-
Yes.
That's correct.
So the decision before us is, do we use some of the money that's already been appropriated to do the job with the fuller scope of work?
Right.
Yes.
And my 2 cents on that is, that anything we do, we ought to do it right. And if we know that there's an issue, and we're already addressing it in this area, and where we already have the money appropriated, and where it's a small sum of $6,900, I'd say, let's do it. I would note that as we said at town meeting, this is a really important community focus. It's on Main Street, people see it all the time. It's a place where we do a number of community events. It's a truly beautiful statute. It ought to be done right. So as far as I'm concerned, let's spend the money.
So in this package, it describes resetting the stones as a very small job, which is a reason not to rebid it. And so $7,000 or so worth of granite work, right, is the amount. Did you have different prices from other people for the extra? Was $7,000 a reasonable number?
Yes. The amounts for the additional work ranged from 7,000 to
15,
15,000.
yeah.
Just to reset those stones?
Yes.
And
Is that resetting them and mortaring them?
That sort of followed the very wide range that we had for the rest of the work. In other words, those numbers fell right into line.
Yes.
Is the extra just resetting them, or is it also the mortar, or is the mortar carried in
The
the
mortar
in
is
the base?
included.
Okay,
The
it's in
mortar
base.
is
You're
included
gonna do it
in
either
the
way.
base bid, which
Right.
is why we really thought that we should consider making that mortar last as long as possible, not have to go in and rebid a small job, or have you consider rather, and of course, we've considered it too. And have that mortar, if the stones are reset, last as long as possible without deteriorating. And the deterioration on a larger, I think they're called perfs, at least with bricks, is always going to be greater if it's a wider joint than if it's a nice tight joint.
And did anybody give you any estimates of how long that is apt to last if you don't do anything to it?
If we don't do anything,
don't-
if we don't
If you
do
did
it.
not, if you did not reset them, if you just mortared it?
If we just
Is there some
mortar it-
estimate, what kind of time you're saving by
It's-
doing it this way?
It's a little hard to predict because a lot of factors affect it, most especially the weather. But Lisa Howe, the consultant, said that with the wider joints, the mortar is likely to start to break down within about 5 years. If we reset the stones and so make the joints, I think she said 3/4 of an inch or less, it should last about 15 years plus or minus.
And these panels on the back, those aren't going to start deteriorating at some point too?
They, well, I suppose in theory they could, but they are true.
Okay.
It's just,
Not a
it's
problem.
just the side walls
Right.
that are out of plumb. The panels on the back are also, the mortar in them is of a different makeup. It's actually lead, which I guess was a common material to use for that kind of work at the time this was built, and it doesn't tend to break down like cement does.
Did you ever consider Mayan dry stone construction where they don't use any mortar, like they did at Machu Picchu and Ollantaytambo in the 15th century?
What a
Not
scholar.
personally, no.
My
Would you
grandfather
like
was
to
a
do a
stonemason
demonstration for us?
and he used mortar, so.
What can I move? Make a motion, or you want to have more discussion?
Anybody else have anything,
No, I think
questions,
it
comments?
makes sense to do it all at once.
Also,
So I'd move that we approve the masonry, A1 masonry proposal, including alternate 1, reset sidewalls.
Second. Okay. I would just say for myself, this went to town meeting. This was a project that was approved. It was approved at 30,000 so that we could get the grant, but the understanding was we weren't going to spend all this money. I'm comfortable voting in favor of it, but I am a little concerned that, I don't want to throw good money after bad. I know the last time this was done, it had to be, not the setting, but the statute had to be redone relatively quickly, which was a complaint at town meeting. And I just want to make sure that the reason we're doing this is because it's going to be done right and it's actually saving us in the long run.
Yeah,
If we spend money now.
And I commend Peggy and Susie for being transparent about this. I mean, there's
Yeah,
enough
and
money.
it- but I
There's
think-
enough money that you probably could have funded this.
Right, I
without
think,
the
I think
original
this
grant, but
plan
this
is
the right
better
way to do it.
because it's not going to come in by dribs and drabs.
Right.
But I also think it needs to be justified by the fact that we would be doing this at some point in the future and we're going to actually save some time. And it sounds like from what you said, we would save some time, so,
The other thing to consider here is that we cannot put our finger on when the work on the granite monument was done last. It's been a long time. That monument held up really well.
Yeah, we haven't.
And I
done-
would expect that this is a conservative estimate by Lisa Howe as to how long it will last if we do the whole thing right and through and keep the purse nice and small.
So are we getting like an 80-year warranty on this? Is that?
that's what it sounded like.
I wish.
Ask your grandfather if he
Yeah.
gave warranty.
The bronze statue takes more maintenance
Mm-hmm.
than the granite. It's a more fragile material. So that will need ongoing maintenance and periodic retreatment. The granite should hold up. We couldn't find any records of any work having been done on the granite.
And
It
I've
may
been
have
on the
done at
commission a
some time,
long
but-
time.
You don't remember this
No.
ever happening, huh?
Mm-mm.
All right.
Yeah, this is entitled on the Cemetery Commission. I have one question. Contingency, is that all built in as far as if there's additional fees or costs?
I think there's a fixed bid, isn't it?
I believe that it's a fixed bid. There was contingency built into, remind
Into the
me
grant
about.
request, there was
Mass
something.
Historic insisted on a certain,
That had to do with cash flow because of, the town has to expend the funds
Yeah.
before they can be reimbursed.
that's right. That's what it was.
So that was the contingency, because they required the town to approve an amount of at least 75% of the projected
It was
total
built
cost
into
of
the,
the
it was built into the
project.
vote.
Yes, that was
built
built
into
into
the
the
total.
vote.
It was, yes.
And just one more question about these panels. Are we sure that the panels themselves are true? In other words, when you adjust them, are they square so that that joint can be made up on the front and back? Or are they set like this because they're not square panels?
No, I believe that enough
Somebody's checked that?
measurements were done by enough people who looked at this that I think, had they not been square, we'd have heard about it.
Okay. All right, so we've got a motion on the table, we've got a second, all in favor? All right, hey, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Good presentation.
Thanks for
We
all the work
expect,
you
we
do.
expect that she'll be really beautiful come June.
Very good. Okay, so, second item is the nuisance dog hearing, and we'll have our designated dog hearing selectman walk us through what we need to do now.
Well, just to refresh everybody's recollection, we had a hearing on September 27th with Mr. and Mrs. Sutter. They had 2 dogs. We had determined that they were a nuisance, but none of the complainants regarding the dogs attended the hearing. They had, at that point, started putting the dogs in the barn at night to minimize their barking. Since then, there have been, looks like there's been no new complaints. But more recently, on January
One
8th,
in October,
one in October,
beginning of October.
I was looking for that, that's not in the,
It's in his letter.
Yeah, there was one.
and then we got a note from our assistant town administrator that said on January 9, 2018, Diane Moore's received a return phone call from Mrs. Sutter. She informed me that right before the end of October 2017, they returned the dogs to the original owners who had moved to Maine and had plenty of land for the dogs to roam. So the dogs are no longer in the town. There's no longer jurisdiction over them anymore. And I think it's all been resolved to everybody's satisfaction at this point.
That's great. Good, thanks, Paul, for that update. Anybody have any questions up here? No? Okay, so what do we have to do now? Just dispose of it? That's it? Do we have to take any votes? No?
Yeah, it's just a report.
Yeah, but I mean, we left that hearing open, though. Don't we want to just
Move to
dispose
close
of
the
the hearing, move to
Makes
close
sense to me.
and
Okay.
dismiss of the hearing?
I'd move to close the hearing based on this information.
Okay, all in favor? Great, good. All right, hearing's closed. Now we've got budgets. And David, is there a particular order that you've set this up for, or?
There are people here.
I know they are. I know, I mean, I do see some people here.
One more. How many, are you waiting for more? No? Okay. I don't know, you might want to start with conservation.
Kelly's been here longest. He was here on time.
All right, well, we were already, or we're 3 minutes early on this item.
So you've got your budget books here, Sharon, put everything together.
Oh, it's that time of year. I love this. This is so
Putting my
nice.
name on it now.
Notification.
We start switching.
Is what's in the budget book the same as what's in the handout?
Yes, it is.
Lost your book last year.
Well, no, I just got switched around. I think I had yours for a couple of weeks.
You might have.
Wrote some nasty notes.
Okay, Kelly.
Okay,
Thank you for coming in.
I'm Kelly McClintock, 65 Woodland Street, Treasurer of the Conservation Commission. The budget, I hope, is relatively simple for this year. No increases other than the COLA that was allowed by advisory. Everything else is level funded. Almost all the money or all the other accounts are going to be spent exactly the same way. The land management part of this has been the most difficult year in and year out for some time as we learn more about how to take care of these reservations. The budget is the same, but we're taking care of them differently, funding it differently. We've been very lucky in the number of people in town who work on this, contribute to it. We had projected a significant expenditure for mowing one field that now is going to be completely taken care of by private parties. But we are finding that we have to do additional mowing and brush hogging to keep invasives down around the borders in some other fields. So absolutely, we're in an extended learning curve. We have some real experts who are helping us. And I think we're making a pretty good difference compared to 5-10 years ago.
Kelly, quick question. The rolling three-year average for contractual services, what you've just been talking about, has been running at 3255, and it's budgeted for not quite double, well, more than double
Yes.
that, at 7675. So I'm assuming you've been turning money back into the.
No, the 3-year average started when that line was much lower. And last year, there was a really significant increase. Last year was the first fiscal 18 was the first year we had the benefit of the results of a state grant helping us work with invasives and field restoration.
Right.
We hired Ted Elliman, Sherborn resident, who is one of the state's best experts on invasive species. He was the invasive species coordinator for the New England Wildflower Society and has walked us through experiments in doing this. And the significant increase from it went from very roughly under $3,000 to about $6,000, was purely our judgment, which was very thoroughly briefed in our submissions last year, that we needed that increase in order to take care of the properties.
So
And
what's
we-
the actual been for 2018?
So far,
Yeah,
it's been far under the 6,000 because a lot of that money is going to be spent in the spring. The spring is the best time to deal with a lot of these species. And I would admit that we were going to do some work in the fall, later in the fall, and that got squelched by the snowfall. We weren't able to deal with it. So it's real, we probably only spent less than 2,000 of that amount so far.
and what's your best estimate on what the actual spend is going to be based on the work you're going to be doing in the spring is?
We're gonna spend almost all of it. We won't go over.
Yeah, yeah, last year was the big bump. I'm just trying to figure out,
No, fair enough, and,
because it's, you know, it's more than 100% higher than the three-year rolling average, which is
Yes.
to your point of, it's the reason why the three-year rolling average can be misleading if there's
well, this is,
outlier.
that line is very unusual. And I would certainly hope that we're going to be able to live within the amount that we've got now for the indefinite future.
Haley, how much of this is paid for by application fees, and how much of this is coming out of the town's pocket?
Mike, the application fees, I would like to be able to give you the fiscal 17 total.
Yeah.
Allery was asking for that, and we got a revenue sheet that was clearly inaccurate. We know there were a whole lot of fees that came in that weren't reflected there. That showed about $18,000 or $19,000 in fiscal 16, which was probably the high point. It was 25,500. We know it's going down after that because we changed procedures for a lot of our RDAs, requests for determinations, which were $150, to a much simpler procedure that is $70 that doesn't require going through the commission. And so the number of RDAs dropped precipitously after fiscal 16. So the total fees definitely is going to go down.
But it's some percentage of this, so I mean, there's.
Oh, yeah, and
There's some offset.
without question.
Okay.
You may remember it wasn't too long ago that we were basically funded by the town at a level twice what the fees was, assuming that the fees would be 50%. And because the actual fee level went up and down, we persuaded the board and advisory in the town that the fees all ought to go to the town, but we ought to have our budget independently of it.
Right.
And I would like to give you, Allery's going to be able to fix this up when she gets back in on Tuesday. We will report on what the fiscal 17
great.
total fees were.
That'd be good, thank you. Anybody else have questions? No.
Just a comment that this is a very minor increase year to year. In 18, there were 57.7. This is 58.7. It's really a small increase.
Just from the, go ahead.
Well, it's-
Finish. It's the COLA.
It's just the COLA. We would love to boost this up. There are a lot of things we would like to do, but we understand the situation, and
I'm not complaining, I'm just saying why we should support it, is that it's a very modest increase. It's in line with the COLA. It's doing good things, and I have to say, I'm always amazed with the volunteerism in the town, where a committee with unpaid committees out there in fields and mud and all kinds of weather, taking care of our wetlands and our resources, so.
well, it's with the library, it's with the Council on Aging, it's conservation. It's a hell of a good town to live in. And on behalf of the commission, I'd really like to thank the Board of Selectmen and Advisory for support of the increase that we got last year. It's making a big difference.
Great, thank you for coming in, Kelly, for that presentation.
I got another comment.
Oh, you do, good.
Was there any discussion with Allery regarding her need for more hours in the event that some of these construction projects start?
Oh, Sean,
Both 40Bs have wetlands on them,
oh, God.
so I gotta
That
imagine
has
she's gonna
been
spend.
just a labor sink on her part. I mean, it's taken so much time. And yes, Trask funds the outside consultants, but the amount of time that Allery and commission members too have spent analyzing this stuff, writing recommendations to Zoning Board of Appeals. We've had the appeal going on of the Fields project. It's been terribly difficult. She does need more hours. We're working it through. Not working through additional hours, but working with what we've got.
Which isn't enough. And won't be enough.
No. Other things give. Because you can't not spend the time on that.
Right. So where's it gonna be funded from?
She doesn't spend the time on it. She takes the time out of other stuff.
Then I don't support it.
I'm sorry?
Then I'm not gonna support that. I don't think we should short fund projects that we're legally obligated to do. And then
We will,
we're intentionally short funding it.
yes, we will think more carefully about that.
Well, so what are you asking for, though, Sean? Are you asking for them to come back with an estimate of what it's gonna cost to move those two projects through on top of whatever their other budget?
Well,
would be?
I would venture to guess that they're gonna blow their budget this year with the amount of times they spent on the fields already, and it hasn't even started.
Well, they don't have a way to blow their budget this year.
Well,
Right, what he's saying,
they're
though,
gonna be in deficit. Yeah, they're gonna. I bet they'll.
We were, yes, the time is being spent.
Reserve fund.
We were not planning on overspending,
Which means you're not spending time doing things you should be doing,
yes.
like site visits on other construction projects.
She squeezes those in. Not quite sure what to ask. I mean,
I just think this is the struggle between being told to level fund when you know you shouldn't level fund.
yeah.
I think you're short this year, and you're setting yourself up to be shorter next year, and I don't know how you.
I don't know
Overcome.
how we deal with that. Allery is a shade under 20 hours. If she takes on significant more hours, it's a pretty big hit on the town.
Not
And we
Kelly.
are conscious of that.
Kelly, over here, straight over. Not, not significant hours, it's just 1 hour. You add 1 hour, and it becomes a benefited position.
Yeah. But I think we need to take a really hard look at that, and if we really need an additional period of time, we need to tell you.
The solution, by the way, is not to add more hours to an employee, but perhaps to hire for a big project, a contracted outfit or an employee, contracted
Consultant.
consultant, that's the word, thank you, to assist on those particular big projects. So that wouldn't go into the salary line item, that would go into what they have for,
Well, we've got a contractor line.
Not really.
So it's still,
Right. I just still think they're underfunded.
is there stuff that Allery does that could be either pushed down to the administrative person or else contracted out at a lower rate?
I know there's nothing more she can put down to the administrative assistant. And bringing on that administrative assistant a couple of years ago, by the way, was a tremendous assist. The consultant approach, I don't know. I'd have to talk with her and Michael about that.
All right, so there's some ideas here.
Just one thing to keep in mind, just because I was at the advisory meeting last night and just coming from advisory so recently. This year, just to back up a little bit with the big picture with the budget, the advisory guidance had level funded, which allowed about a $600,000 guidance reserve, or the piñata, as Ben Williams refers to it as. The submitted budgets in total are 1.2 million. So there's 600,000 to even get, that needs to come out of the budgets that were submitted to get down to where we need to be. I mean, across all budgets, but just to keep that big picture in mind, I think is really important.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you, Kelly.
Well, before he
Wait,
leaves,
you gotta let the guy leave sometime.
but shouldn't we take some action here of some kind? I mean,
Well, I kind of just asked him to go back and meet with Michael. I think he said he was gonna, so we're not supporting it. We're not supporting it.
well,
We're gonna have to come back.
I do support it the way it is. So, there may be a division of thinking on the board here. My thought being that we don't know when these projects are gonna come online, we don't know how much demand's gonna be, so we ought to budget for this conservatively, and then if something big needs to happen, and when it needs to happen, we have other ways to fund it. Otherwise, what budget are they gonna have? So if the will of the board is that he go off and redo the budget, then we're gonna have him come back in with some other budget, and where are the funds gonna come from if there aren't any funds available, which is what George just said. So it may be a good idea. There's a lot of budgets that could use a lot. We spend a lot more on legal, for example, or other things that we could put money into. But if we don't have it, in this state, you have to have a balanced budget. And they're doing a good job. It's not clear that they're gonna need to have to spend all this money in the short term. Permitting takes longer than you think. So I would ask the chair, in the course of doing these budgets, are we approving budgets that we think are okay and disapproving budgets, or what is
We
the
always
goal?
do that. Every year, we go through this, and nobody really knows.
It's helpful if you,
Last year, we didn't, and
We didn't touch it.
I regretted it, and me and Paul both wanted to.
Yeah.
it's helpful as you
We can knock some
see
off.
them that we can approve them, and you can always revisit the total budget at
Yeah.
any
I
point
kind
later.
of think, on this one, I agree with both Sean and Paul, because I'm diplomatic, but also because. You can't agree with both. But also because I think Paul has persuaded me that it's good to get something on the board, and I also think George has persuaded me that this is not really a year where the town is going to authorize an increase in funding for Conservation Commission. But at the same time, I agree with Sean, because I think we ought to get Conservation thinking about this and get some information from them, if, to do nothing else but to set some type of a first step for a future year, or at least to make it so it's not so surprising if you do need a transfer later.
Yeah. I certainly doubt that these big projects are gonna stop.
Right.
And
So think
putting
about
some
what
real
those numbers
thought
would be.
into it and
Yeah.
coming back to you,
So,
yes.
is Paul, are you gonna make a motion, Paul, or did you already make a motion?
Well, I was gonna make a motion to approve this budget as presented, with the caveat that the Conservation Commission would continue to work on it, and if it had some ways to address the point raised, we have you come back. But otherwise, we have a baseline.
Wait, Diane's hand just fell off. Hang on a second.
Let me second
I
that.
think the
before you
motion
go
should
any
just be, the motion should be
I'm not sure
approve the
what
budget
caveat
as
is. We're approving this
presented.
budget, and they may.
They
wanna
may come
amend
back.
it.
That's what
We're
I
able to
would,
reopen,
That's what it is.
we're able to reopen the vote if we
At
need
any
to,
time,
so-
yes.
we could always
All right.
look at it again, but
Okay, so I'm gonna second George's motion.
I move that we approve the budget as presented.
All seconding that, all in favor? Boy, it took a long time to get there. And it was unanimous, look at that.
Thank you,
Great job
gentlemen.
you did, thank you.
So, George, do you want one of those thermometers with the $600,000 bogey?
We should, we gotta put it right up on the wall.
The red, we want it to come down?
I want you all to see the big I want to make sure
We'll see, if we
everybody's seeing
took
the
a
whole
dollar
thing.
off of 600,000 budgets, Chuck, we'd be done.
I think Sharon and Allery could probably come up with an interesting revenue projection for 19,
Yeah.
based on the field's permitting, and probably some of the work that's gonna start at Coolidge Street. That would at least be interesting to see.
Okay, great. All right, so next, David, who's second in line?
Elder housing?
Elder Housing, fantastic.
We were thinking before you let them go that you could address their two NOIs later in the agenda.
Oh, so you want to interrupt that? It's probably fine, because, except we've got Doug here too, so maybe we'll take Doug and then go back to them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where is it?
Elder Housing?
Reserve
it's-
funds in the back.
It's in the very back.
It's in the back because it's
It's a
not
reserve
actually,
fund.
it's
Right,
not
it's a
actually
revolving
money
fund.
coming out of our
Yeah.
pockets this
It's a
year.
revolving fund, Paul.
Revolving fund, yeah.
Sean's already approved your budget.
Thank
This is
you.
great. No, go ahead, this is always a
Is
good.
that the way he celebrated his birthday, by
Yeah.
approving our budget?
This is always a good presentation.
Celebrating my wife's birthday,
It's your wife's birthday, I'm sorry.
and mine.
Okay, and
No one really cares
welcome,
about mine.
George.
Thank you.
Delighted to have you on board. Good evening, gentlemen. First of all, our committee has been called to order since we are presently a board of 5 people instead of 9 that we are allowed. And my personal opinion, the board has been working very well with just 5 members. We're delighted to be here, and the members of the committee that are with me are Joe Meany and Mike Kickham. Since I've said that, the rest of that paragraph, I won't repeat it. Woodhaven, our residential apartments off Village Way, continues to be fully occupied. For the record, we have updated 18 of the 24 apartments. We still have approximately $150,000 of the original bond issue to spend. And that will be done as when the apartments have been vacated, not before. I will ask Joe Meany to review our fiscal 19 budget request. Please remember that elder housing budget is now paid from a revolving account. Funds are accumulated from rents paid in the prior fiscal year, and our expenses are limited to the funds available at the time of town meeting. Joe, it's all yours.
I think you all have a copy of our budget.
Yes.
What our proposed budget is an operating budget of $217,387, plus debt service of $39,390. So the total we're looking for is $256,777. The budget in many ways is similar to what we've had in the past and you've seen. Some of the highlights might be in our landscaping and outside maintenance work. We're proposing an increase there over what we've had in past years because we want to add irrigation for the planting areas. It's becoming harder and harder to get those watered. It's mostly, plants, obviously.
Joe, is that a one-time expense then?
Yes.
So would that be more of a capital item than like improvements than,
$4,000.
oh, I thought it was
Well, it's a-
8,000. I just was wondering if it should be categorized as more like improvements than landscape, just so when you look at it next year, it's not gonna fluctuate as much.
Yeah, is this putting in irrigation, or is this paying somebody to water? What's the $8,000 buying?
The 8,000 would be an underground
Sprinkler system.
sprinkler system,
Okay.
either a drip system or, Janet Walsh heads up, on our committee, heads up all our landscaping work, and she's working with people on a system to do that. it could be considered a capital expense, but right now, we're okay within,
Right, I was just saying in the repair replacement line item, because it seems like that's one that fluctuates year to year, whereas when you compare the landscaping line item, an operating line, you'd want to see it to be more consistent, I would think.
well, we could move it down there. It's just in my mind, it's kind of where it
I think it'd be better to
belongs.
characterize it as an irrigation system. Irrigation for planting areas, sounds like you got somebody out with a hose watering the plants, so,
Are you available?
no.
Okay. Well, it won't change the total, but we'll move it down
Right,
to the
that's what I-
repair
Right,
replacement.
right.
Another smaller item like that is the alarm system expenses. That happens to be the next item on the first page. Because we're going to replace the existing emergency pendants we have for the residents. So that is, looking at it that way, that's a one-time charge of $2,900. The other items going through them, building supplies, rubbish removal, electricity, most of these coming on the second page are pretty much a lot what we've had before. But even as George was mentioning, you get down to repair and replacement, that's where we have a lot of movement yearly. And that's down, it's 77,000 down from what we had on our previous budget. The big difference is we had a lot of paving we were doing in this current year. So we don't have that coming up in 2019. But we do have an item like to upgrade the community room kitchen in that budget, that's 77,000. Another item you can see is a substantial change is the debt service. If you look back to fiscal 2016, the debt service we were carrying then was $92,000. That has steadily decreased, partly because we've paid off our old bond issues, and this year, we're actually paying the first 4 units that we renovated. That's being paid off in fiscal 2018. But we haven't borrowed the money to do the last 6 renovated apartments. People have been staying in those apartments. I think you've heard us say this for a couple of years now. So we haven't taken on additional debt, and we're down now to 39,000, which gives us the total. You see the fee for services, I went past that, just above the total line. And we also gave you the formula that we use to calculate that fee for service. Excuse me just a second. What was that, 6?
It's in the package. It's in your selecting package that Diane sent
What?
out. Calculation.
What calculation?
It's in the packet.
The CMD one?
I just went by
I
too
got
quickly.
hung up about 6 lines earlier.
That one, yep.
Huh? No, I know, me and Mike are
Sorry.
off on a different tangent at the moment.
Before I go into fee for service, was there any other questions on, or comments on the budget?
Yeah, I got one. I think, David can correct me, the rubbish removal, are you paying that? Or is that just representing the portion of Ruane's
We
contract?
pay,
We pay to have rubbish.
Still? Thought
As
you
soon
rolled
as-
that into the contract.
We rolled all the other ones in. I'm not sure why this one wasn't rolled in at the time. I
Okay.
mean, we had discussion with Ruane. We can do a contract amendment with him, or we can,
I guess it
we'll
doesn't matter.
fix it
Maybe
in
it's
the
better
next
that it's
one.
pulling out of the revolving fund.
But we are still paying the full amount with, whatever they presented us for.
They're invoicing you each month.
I guess it's
They're
fine.
invoicing you each month.
yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
My comment would be that the total that you're seeking, 266, is significantly, or 256.
256, yeah.
Is significantly below the year before, which is 291, and significantly below the year before that, which was 292. So how can we complain that you're spending less money than you did the last 2 years?
But we don't, that.
'Cause they're not doing
The
paving.
warrant article is not included in that amount, which we have done an NOI for you.
And also, it's not apples to apples if you exclude the paving, which is a one-off, so, I mean, it's great that it's gone down, but it's because of a blip.
It's paving, but it's also the debt service continuing.
service.
Yeah, and the debt service is the other big, right, those are the two numbers worth talking about.
Yeah,
Yep.
really.
Yep.
Yeah.
What is the balance of the revolving fund?
It's, well, let me see, well,
We've got a tab for it in here.
I do.
No, it was in
We started,
58,000.
well, we started the fiscal year, we had a balance of, actually, I can give you a little, my breakdown if that helps you. It's mostly data that I've gotten from our
If you
finance
just want
director.
to tell us, I think that's.
Oh, okay. Well, we started the fiscal year with a balance of call it $428,000. When you deduct that fiscal 2018 budget and the debt service, plus some funds we encumbered from 2017, we then started with the year with call it $110,000. The revenue that we've received and the revenue we estimate coming in up until town meeting, and taking an allowance for some vacancy, going into town meeting, we should have $362,000, 360, call it. So then if you take out what we're asking for, the 256, or call it 257, and we have a warrant article request for putting money, $25,000 into our stabilization fund, we should be fine.
Okay,
That's-
anything,
If you,
any other comments, questions?
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded for approval of this budget. All in favor? Okay.
George, it's okay to vote no sometimes, just wanted.
And now we have two NOIs.
Not when budgets go
Yeah,
down,
do you want to
Chuck.
go through those? That'd be great, Katie.
Can I jump to one kind of mechanical thing real quick for future discussion between me and someone? Please make sure we include Whitewater before we make any plans for the sprinkler system. Whitewater, the operator of the wells,
We work with them all the time.
I know.
Yeah.
Make sure they have to, actually, DEP has to approve that.
who has to approve that?
DEP.
Environmental,
Approve the Whitewater is our operator?
No.
Approve
Whitewater
plan,
will have to
yeah.
send in paperwork to put the sprinkler system in.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Sprinkler, I'm sorry, I was still on
Minimal,
the
but-
water treatment, okay.
We have enough problems with DEP at the moment.
Okay, where are we now?
Warrant articles?
Where are the notices?
yeah, so what,
Okay.
Next page on
No, I think it's
Oh,
the
that's right behind this.
Yeah.
It's
right
in
behind
the
it packet.
meeting packet, right?
Because you can't
Okay.
encumber
17.
for the reason. Yeah.
The first NOI is a replacement of funds that had been requested to be encumbered at the end of fiscal 2017, but were returned to the revolving account. Payments for paving and electrical work were charged to our current budget, and we are requesting that the funds from the revolving account be added to our current budget line item.
Where's this, David? Which one?
That's not the one we have, we have it in a different order.
Yeah, if you flip,
What we have is the capital stabilization.
We have the capital
If
stabilization.
you flip two more pages.
I handed in that one first, not the
Okay,
stabilization
so
second.
do we know what number it is, though?
two more pages in your,
Where is it on the
I
front?
don't think you have it on the list, though.
It's not on the list.
that you
my
gave
point.
us.
yeah, it's number, where is it?
There's two there for Kitty.
No, there's only one on the new list that you
One on the
gave us.
list, 17 is the only elderly housing article on there.
Isn't it under supplemental?
There's one here. And actually, what we're really doing, because I didn't encumber the funds, because you don't encumber with revolving funds, technically. So I spoke with our auditors, and they said that all we're doing is just transferring the FY17 budgeted funds, the 22,445 and the 4,200, transferring those budget from 17 to 18. And the reason being is that they were incurred in 17, but they were paid in 18. So it's just moving it from one bucket to another.
So what,
You have to request it.
Do it, or do we?
Well, the auditors told me, I mean, I have it in writing and I can send this to everyone. They told me that we could just slide it.
So it doesn't need to be a warrant
That
article.
it doesn't need to be a warrant
Okay,
article.
fine.
Yeah.
They'll be personally, I put it in just
Yeah, I
to
don't have it.
Yeah,
cover
just
everything.
to be
I'll look on it.
upfront
That's
about
good.
it.
So-
Yeah.
Thank you.
They-
It would
And they
ju-
told me of a different way to handle it next year.
Yes,
So,
yes.
so it would be a vote by the Elder Housing Committee to make the move, and then there's no need for a warrant article.
no, it's fine,
Okay.
yeah.
Fine, well, that's wonderful
So-
news.
So we can eliminate item 17 on the line list?
So we don't,
No.
we don't need an article, we're just.
Chuck, 17 is something different.
That's this one, okay, thanks.
Yeah, so
Great,
that's
got
fine.
it.
And that's great.
Okay.
And then the second, or now the only article, NOI that we're requesting is, 2 years ago, we requested, and it was approved at the 2016 annual town meeting, a stabilization fund for capital expenses going forward. We are requesting a transfer of $25,000 from our revolving account to this fund this year. This will enable us, when we have a major capital expense, that we can avoid going out for bonding by the town on our behalf. And I'm grateful the town went along with this idea.
So we created it. Did we fund it yet?
No, we did not, we
This'll
just
be the initial
estab-
funding.
We just established it 2 years ago, and this is the initial funding.
I think this is a great idea to have these we set up the stabilization fund to have the capital available when it's needed, to put it in when you have the extra funds, as we just discussed in your revolving fund. I think it's a good time to do it.
But you have a dollar amount in mind?
25.
Yeah, because the submission doesn't have it. At least I don't see it on item 17.
It's on here somewhere.
Shock.
Wasn't it in the original? I sent it in.
You put to be determined on the,
Yeah, it went
on the one you
TBD.
submitted.
Oh, I did, okay.
She just determined. What's it take to get the money out?
It will be a vote of the town meeting, correct, to take the
To
money
spend it, to
from-
move it?
To move
it from stabilization to pay the bill.
2/3.
So it's gonna sit there, but there's a year lag before you can spend it again.
Yeah, but you'd be planning it in the budget coming, and you would be requesting the transfer from the stabilization fund to pay for the item.
In future years, you would
Right.
bring an
You
article
can't use it
forward.
for an emergency.
No.
If you gotta go drill a well, that's coming from somewhere else.
Oh, don't even bring up a subject like that, Sean.
Sorry. I was just trying to think of something big that could
No.
happen.
It's putting money aside so they have to replace roofs and that kind of thing, rather than having to bond it.
Oh, he could say it.
But that's down the road, not
Yeah.
happening right away.
Right.
Right. The hope is 5 or 6 years worth of
Right.
hits go into it, and then
If you have an emergency, if we had an emergency come up, could we go through whatever channel it is to get the money released from our revolving fund rather than from your rainy
or
day
reserve
fund?
fund transfer, right? They can use reserve fund.
always
transfer.
You have to go to a special town meeting
Yeah.
to expend from the capital stabilization fund.
You can
So it
always
would take
do
a few weeks,
But could they use it from their revolving fund, they're saying? Because they have.
and then
kind of that-
reimburse the revolving fund later with the capital.
Because they have like $100,000 cushion, it seems like, in their revolving fund at all times, so.
It appears to be.
It's,
Well, he-
be needed an
It's to advance
appropriation.
it from the revolving fund, and then at the annual town meeting, replenish the revolving fund with, from a transfer from stabilization.
All
That's
right,
the way you do
Okay,
it.
sounds good. Hey, Kitty, when you came in, you said your board was, did you say it's short some members? Do you need new members on your board?
Years ago, they set it up as 9 members. I think I personally feel 9 members is awkward.
Yep.
Kid,
And I
you
don't
think
think
5 is
in the-
almost
in the
always the right
six-
number, right?
5 to 7 is fine, but I think 9 is really.
Because we were going to try to do
stretching.
9 selectmen, but I don't know if that'll work.
I might vote against that
Might
one.
vote against that one. All right, that's fine. I just, if you thought there was a need, I was gonna see if we could task David with, beating the bushes and working with you to get some people out there.
David
but
has
if
been
not,
working with us.
yeah, good, okay.
So that, and you ask people, and sometimes they'll come to a few meetings and then say that they just feel they don't have something to contribute.
Okay.
So,
Well, you guys are doing such a great job anyway, so.
well,
And you might-
we're very fortunate.
Problem is, what do you need for a quorum? 6? 7?
No, if we're 5 members, if the
Three.
quorum is 3.
Oh, you've naturally
'cause it-
dropped to 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can,
Okay.
yeah, they're
So
fine.
can I move to approve NOI number 1? A, to put it on the warrant, and B, to support it.
Support it? I'll second.
Okay. I mean, I didn't know we were gonna take votes on supporting warrant articles. I think it's a good idea to put it to, vote to put it on the warrant. Don't we typically have a meeting where we walk through and support warrant articles? I mean, this one's a no-brainer, but
We-
still,
We defer those that are coming out of the general fund, that are,
yeah.
because we want to be sure it balances, but this isn't coming out of the general fund, it's coming out of a revolving fund. It's kind of separate and offline.
Yeah, I suppose it doesn't really matter, so that's fine. I mean, it matters to you, but it doesn't matter to us whether we vote now or later, so. All right, so we got a motion and second. Chuck, you got some thoughts on this?
No, I just, in the past, we've considered them, where we had enough information to be able to vote, we've considered them at a meeting. Doing
Altogether, yeah.
doing a seriatim, I don't have a problem with, either way.
I would think it would be cleaner to have it all at one meeting, actually, where we run through the, kind of after we've been able to see everything in total, to say this, whether we support certain warrant articles or not.
Mark said the same thing. It's gotta be an advisory. They like that Saturday.
Well, I also, I think it's a burden on David and Diane to
Right.
keep track of what we voted yes for, what we put aside, what we've sort of voted on, haven't voted on. I mean, would you accept a friendly amendment to just say we're gonna put this on the warrant and leave the voting on it?
And
till
do the
later?
voting on, once we've heard all the warrant articles.
That's fine on warrant, but
Our newest member, who's got the expertise from advisory, will accept the
Okay,
friendly amendment.
so do we have a second on the friendly amendment? Would probably be you.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so all in favor to put this article on our warrant? Okay, this one's going on the warrant. Thank you.
I still want to distinguish between budgets and NOIs. Because I regretted
Yeah,
that we
that's
made,
fine.
we made it all the way to the end
That's
and
fine.
hadn't, there was a couple of budgets like this one, we would have just supported. And
Yeah,
at least get them
yeah,
off the
Budgets,
checklist.
budgets I can see
That's
supporting
fine.
along the way.
Council
but-
on Aging, we fought.
I hear you.
Me and Paul just kind of threw down and said, we're voting.
Sharon's keeping track of the budgets. I'm keeping track of the warrant.
Okay.
They won't be confused.
No, we won't confuse anyone.
So we go to veterans then?
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
next is Veterans Committee. Thank you.
One quick thought on, if you are looking for additional members, because of all the work that the Affordable Housing Committee, Housing Partnership Committee did, you may consider grabbing some of those folks, if they still have any energy left.
May I, Mike, may I
Yes,
just say a
Katie.
couple more
Thank you.
words? 5 year,
Sorry.
it was 5 years ago, working with the Board of Selectmen, the treasurer, who else did we have on that committee? And
The acting
Jim-
Jim Purcell, the acting
We
administrator.
drew up
Pete Holman.
the fee-for-service policy. And at that time, the selectmen had asked that we review it in 5 years. If I could ask that we put this on the agenda or on a piece of paper to be looked at this coming summer
Okay.
going forward. And then the other thing I would like to mention, our other 2 members, Dr. David Curtis and Janet Walsh.
Great, thank you. So on that first point, Kitty, so I understand, you want us to put it on a selectmen agenda in the summer?
No, it's something that David, we
You're going to work with David on it this
work
summer?
with David to
Okay.
review it. It may be perfectly fine
Okay.
with what we presently have, but
Okay.
just to make sure we're not missing something.
It'll actually take you guys, me, Sharon, Sean, reviewing it.
Okay, thank you
Very
very
good.
much.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Our veterans is over there.
Okay,
Way left.
we've got the veterans budget, just someplace in here, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great, thank you.
Hey, Doug, good to see you.
This is another one that's pretty straightforward.
Thank you, sir.
As we say in advisory, when somebody comes in.
Thank you.
How'd that feel?
I threw that at you, Doug.
That woke him up.
Okay. All right, so thanks Doug for coming in, and why don't you walk us through what you want us to know about the budget? Your presentation, whatever you want to say.
Okay, before I start, I'd like to congratulate the newest member of the board on his overwhelming electoral victory. Should be very proud of yourself.
You
I'm
got
glad you're here.
90% of the vote. That rivals, I think, that guy in Mugaway in Zimbabwe.
Overall, the budget this year there's no change to it, but I would just like to go through some of the things with you so you understand what's involved in it. There, as I point out at the beginning there's an alternative funding source from the state. Any expenses that we have for benefits and as for flags and markers that we buy, we are reimbursed 75% by the state. I have to put in a voucher for it, and there's a whole involved sort of thing I go through with the state, but eventually we get that money back. And so our costs are 25% of all those things. No supplies and materials, there are no changes. The veterans agent is the same, $700 as before. I serve, my office serves as my home serves as my office, so there are no expenses involved in having space in town hall. I do use a town hall occasionally so I can talk to Diane and also meet with vets and occasionally visit their homes where I go. There's no change there. Care of the veterans' graves, there are no change. I place new flags, and I have help from a number of people doing that every Memorial Day, and also the new markers if necessary. Again, no change. Vets' Day expenses, we raised that $300 last fiscal year because we're having more people involved in it. And that expense covers a lunch for about 125, somewhere around 125 vets and their spouses that attend that lunch. Also covers gifts, monetary gifts to speakers, essay winners, and the closing trumpet. That cost is offset substantially, very helpfully, by Roach Brothers, which makes a contribution, and also by the Impressions Printing in Midway, which they print our invitations for us. They've been doing that for, gosh, I don't know, 8 or 10 years. The same with Roach Brothers. And I do want to acknowledge the veterans who were involved in an important part of this program. Mike Kickham, who's also in charge of the Memorial Day activities, by the way, Craig Winterfelt, and Ray Weiss. And Ray Weiss has instituted the Veterans Day activities at Pine Hill School, which we had not had before his involvement in this committee, where we have a meeting over there, and certain veterans can go over there and speak to the students at Veterans Day, and it's a very nice situation that he's arranged for us there. And also, obviously, thanks to the Scouts and flag presentation and the Pine Hill School Chorus. And there's no change there either. Veterans benefits is $3,000. This is a kind of a tough item because I've been carrying $3,000 for a couple of years, 3 years, without using it, just as a hedge against the possibility of a benefit being awarded. Well, it has happened. There is a benefit that has been awarded now in town. And we, as I say, we will pay the entire amount, but 75% will come back from the state. There is enough in the budget this year, I believe, I'm pretty sure, to be able to get us through this year, but next year I may have to get an increase depending upon how that goes with him. And the seminars and meetings are mandatory And that's the last item in the budget. And again, there's no change in that of $300. So there we are.
So Doug, I had just one question on
Yeah.
this, which is the Veteran Day expenses. So it looks like you only spent 658 last year, but you're asking for an increase from 1,000 to 1,300. And so I just wanted to understand
let me get that.
what that was. And maybe not all the bills are in yet, is that right, or?
Just the,
No, the 1,300
You're
was
back 2
increased
years.
last
yeah,
year.
that was last.
What's the item again?
Oh, he spent 1,300 because he was appropriated 1,300, but 2 years ago it was 658. And so why are we,
Because every year it seems to grow with more people, and I need
Okay.
to order more supplies, and
did we spend the 1,300 this year? I guess that's my
just
question.
the Roche Brothers alone is like over $500, so I'm sure we
All right.
did spend
Yeah.
pretty close
Yeah.
to it.
So that's the food and then the scholarships,
The
or whatever it
gifts,
is?
The scholarships and the
Okay.
gift card for the speaker, and
I mean, as long as you're spending it, fine. I just,
Yes.
It has felt like the attendance has increased over the last couple of years.
Oh, this
so-
year was packed.
Packed, yeah.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
was really incredible. Good.
Yeah,
Anybody else have questions?
But just that Doug has done a beautiful job as Veterans Agent, and the Memorial Day by Mike and the Veterans Day by Doug, these are community building things that are, I think, are important to our,
You speak into the microphone. I have a hard, my hearing is not very good. Thank you.
I think these programs are very successful, very important to our veterans and to all our citizens of the town, and that we should be supporting them. And the amount of money that's being requested is a very tiny piece of the overall budget of the town. So this is not a place where we should be nickel and diming anything, and I would move to approve the budget as requested.
Second.
Anybody else have any things to say? Okay, all in favor?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Doug.
Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, what's next? David, we got just our budgets now, legal, is that what you're?
We have
One
a
thing
board-
I might add,
Oh, go ahead.
I think you would be interested in this, is the Veterans Work Program, which we started the special town meeting a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. That's fully subscribed now. And one of the subscriptions is from a disabled vet's wife who lives here in town. He's completely disabled. And his wife, the spouse of the disabled vet, can earn this stipend. And it's, if you're not familiar with it, it's your basic wage of, I think it's $11 an hour now. And that's applied, they can work up to $1,000, and they can apply that to their real estate taxes. But that has gone well, Paul, because you were
Thank you.
very much involved in getting that started for us. Thank you.
David, didn't we have, do we have an article come in to ask for an increase in the amount of the work
Senior tax
program?
credit?
Is it senior? Is that what
Yeah,
came in?
Yeah,
it is, but it
we-
is, I'm sorry, go
I
ahead.
was gonna say, isn't he next week?
Well, I want to bring it before the Council on Aging Board and get full approval from them before they bring it to the select.
And what would that do?
They are looking to increase it
15, wasn't it?
$15 an hour and to give them more hours.
Okay, so whatever is done through that program, shouldn't it also be done through the Veterans Program too?
Should be the same amount.
I mean, I would think, it doesn't make sense to, just to bear that in mind, if we're going to be talking about the COA proposal, we might want to think about adding
Okay.
a veterans proposal to that, so they're on the same par.
Not to mention, if you stay at 11, you're below the minimum wage now. Didn't the state already move up $1?
Yep, well,
Mass is at 12?
No, you can still do this at 11.
By statute?
It's not whether you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah. The selectmen vote to pay the dollar.
The good thing is you don't pay taxes on it.
Yeah, we don't.
well, it doesn't really even matter the dollar amount, because I think they're only able to earn up to $1,000.
Right.
That's the cap, whether they make
Who
$10
set that
an
cap?
hour.
Is
Us
that
or
our
them?
cap, is that our cap or the
Cap's been
statute?
set by the selectmen, by a
Well, that's
vote
what I'm
of the
saying, so
selectmen.
if COA is asking for a change in that,
Changes to
I'm
make,
just
that's
saying,
why
if the
it comes-
changes are done, they should be done globally, so
Well,
everybody's
right.
on the same
I agree with you.
level.
So are they gonna move the cap up or just the hourly rate?
They want to do both.
Seems
So I
like
made a
a
note,
reasonable thing to do.
I made a
Well,
note
we
to
should talk about it,
revisit.
but yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, but I just didn't want to lose track of, we get down the road and we're not thinking about the fact there's this other
Okay.
program.
So when that comes up, we'll revisit the
Yeah.
veterans too.
Yeah, I think so.
At the same time.
And we've voted to support the budget. Thanks very much, Doug.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so that's, what's next? Next is legal.
Selectmen?
Board of Selectmen,
I didn't.
which is the office
I didn't
budget.
Point out that he misspelled Mike's name.
Do you want me to go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
The Board of Selectmen budget includes a small piece for the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Selectmen Office. This budget's completely level funded in accordance with the advisory guidance, other than the personal services for salaries, which is funded in accordance with Personnel Board's COLA recommendation of 2%. And I think advisory might have voted since then to go with 2%. Okay.
So that's actually, to think of, once you pointed that out in this one, Conservation only did 1.5 on theirs.
So Sharon takes care of that adjustment.
Sharon,
I
you
did
adjust?
adjust it.
You did adjust it, okay.
Yes, I did, yes.
Thank you.
In Contractual Services,
You don't have the adjusted copy in your book?
What?
Okay. It's not 2%.
I can't, I just know we talked about 1.5
Oh,
when Conservation
okay.
was here, so.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely.
His sheet was there.
Well, it's in your binder, it should be at 2%.
Was he?
Okay.
Yeah, it is. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Okay,
Thank you.
That's fine.
Under Contractual Services, in the past, we've been paying, or in the past few years, we've been paying the Code Red system, which has been used quite a bit. An amount of $37.51 to cover that program has been transferred out of the Selectman Office and into the technology line of town buildings. And eventually, someday, we'll break out the technology into its own department out of the town buildings budget. That's just a pitch for the future. So, if you look, it's just, it's showing less than a 2% increase overall in the selectmen's budget, but it's level funded.
Move approval.
And we should discuss this budget. It's our budget, and if people have comments.
It's the same, basically the same as last year plus the COLA. And so we discussed it last year. And the year before, it's basically been the same.
Can I apply that to everything? Anytime we've discussed something before, we can't discuss it
It's
anymore?
just, this looks like a 7-hour meeting tonight, and maybe we can do it in 3.5 hours.
A 7-hour meeting yet. Well, we at some point have to have a hard discussion about staffing in the Board of Selectmen office with a 5-person Board of Selectmen, and a lot of things that get kicked to the Board of Selectmen office that prevent, basically the business prevention department of the town goes into overdrive, and as a result, the Board of Selectmen can't get things done. And, I don't mean Board of Selectmen, us, I mean the Board of Selectmen's office can't get things done. They're trying to do all the things we're trying to move forward, and they're doing a great job with it, but there's a lot of distractions, and there may need to be more hours or more staffing in that office.
Yeah, I'm constantly concerned about the default is if there's something that needs to be getting done, let's have the TA do it.
Right.
And that,
Or the assistant to you.
or the assistant TA, yeah. Absolutely.
So, I don't know if we have that discussion now, maybe people aren't ready to have that discussion now. I've talked with David in the past about trying to put together a proposal on that. I think that's probably one of the things that's been kicked to the side while he deals with whatever the crisis of the day is, but at some point, David and Diane and Sharon, if you can think about, it would probably be a long-term plan. I don't know if this year is gonna be the year that we could implement it, but I think it's in the town's interest to have the selectman's office operating in a way where there's not always a struggle to catch up because something more important came along and preempted all the stuff that needs to get done.
Last year, you increased the admin assistant by 2 hours.
Well, that should have
week.
taken care of it.
And then, and then, what I look back is 2 hours in the selectmen budget and doubled the amount in the CM&D budget from 4 to 8 hours. So you really increased the that position by 6 hours last year. We could locate it all in the selectman office, at least so it's all recorded here. And she would still support CM&D the same way that she does.
Well, does that make sense? That's just an accounting
Yeah.
fiction.
It doesn't really.
Well,
And-
it puts it in one place where we can
Is that a benefit
Better look at
position? Are we triggering benefits?
It's already
benefit it already.
Already benefited.
Yes.
Already.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, that wasn't what I was thinking about.
Yeah, I think it's worth a discussion.
Okay.
I'd like to have a discussion about it.
So I think we should discuss a proposal, so maybe again, on the long list of things, if you can come up with something to bring to us in, a month or two, that would be a good idea. If you can do it before budgets get heard by advisory, then we can try to float it with them. I just don't think I don't think it's gonna happen this year, but,
Well, it has to play into this year a little bit, because we're bringing budgets, and we've already had this discussion with the CM&D budget.
okay.
As a shared employee.
All right, well, then that's good.
I mean, I'm not saying we're gonna get to the end game, but
Okay, good.
Did, last year when you moved, well, I think with moving the buildings and facilities over to CM&D, that took some burden off of the selectman's
well,
office, correct?
so there's
Or-
that's the second thing I tried to bring up.
Well, I think we
In
added
some
the
other
4
meetings.
hours to CM&D because of the combined.
I think George was saying was once CM&D was in charge of buildings, instead of you being in charge of buildings directly, it should have freed up some time, but I'm not sure it actually worked.
But it didn't free it up. There's no one at the office at CM&D.
But there's also,
It's still in that office.
you're also into a lot of things that have like a lifespan. It'll be over at some point, so we don't see the same shift because your capacity is X amount and you're 50% of that capacity is spent on one big project.
And CM&D wasn't staffed for quite a while.
What are you referring to? The thing on the hill?
For months.
Right, for sure.
The new pool with the lanai.
Do what?
The new pool with the lanai built over it.
Right.
A lot of
The
my
fact
towns-
is, more than just shifting.
Right.
It's gonna go
You
up.
gotta have more
We
hours.
created a department.
I know,
also.
I know.
The buildings and facilities is now almost, there's, you can't think we're not gonna do more work without needing more
Right.
time.
A lot of my towns are using students and interns. There's a co-op program at Northeastern.
I think David's got
During the
had a co-op at one point,
Yeah,
right?
you
And
had
there's,
co-ops in the
during the
summer.
summertime, during the summer break, there are people looking for internships.
Still gonna pay them.
We've done pretty well with the intern.
We've done pretty well with the interns, but they're also time consuming.
In other words, it doesn't save you a lot of time because you're trying to figure out what the intern's supposed to be doing.
Tracking the intern, you're reporting to their teacher, you're doing the evaluation, you're trying to find things to do for them. I mean, Diana's witnessed it.
All right, well, so there's more stuff to think
But
about.
we still are on lists for interns, and we're just being a little more picky.
Yeah. I'd kind of like to hold off on voting this, but I don't know what other people feel.
No, I agree. I think we should discuss what the strategy should be for the office and what the proper staffing level should be, and then decide whether this is the year to do it or not. But without knowing exactly what the proper staffing should be, I don't think we should vote on it yet.
I agree.
And we're gonna discuss it again on Tuesday. When I bring my budget.
For CM&D, yeah.
Right.
Okay, all right, good. So that was one more thing.
Mr.
and-
Chair, can we go back a second to the Conservation Commission budget that we voted on?
Yeah,
The Form 1 that was in the packet for the meeting had the 1.5% salary COLA.
Right.
In the budget book, it's the
That's-
2%, so I just wanted it to be clear.
That's the point, Sharon fixed the.
I know, but it's unclear which budget we approved. The Form 1 attached to the meeting minutes, or the one in the budget?
The one in the
raise
budget.
your
One in
hand
the
if-
budget
ra-
book.
Raise your hand if you approve the one in the budget
Yeah.
book.
Here we go.
Okay, great, perfect.
Yeah, because you know what happened was originally I sent all the budgets out to all the budget makers with the 1.5%, because that's what advisory had recommended, and then it got changed, so I had to
I just want the
calculate
numbers
for
to be
everybody.
right. That's-
Yeah, so
Next.
your books are right now.
Legal?
Next is legal budget.
He's on West Coast time, by the way. He'll stay here all night.
Chuck?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
On the legal budget, that's level funded in accordance with advisory guidance. The amount is $80,000. That includes a $72,500 retainer that we confirmed with our current council would stick for next year. And that would begin July 1st. It should be noted that traditionally only the retainer amount or slightly more than the retainer has been appropriated. But if you look at, compare it to the actuals, it's underfunded for 15, 16, 17, 18. But it's traditionally underfunded. And we've discussed each year the reasons for
Sharon,
and
the one in the
against
book,
doing that.
the one in the book
You've
doesn't have,
requested nothing.
What?
the one in the book has a 0.
Move to approve.
Yeah, actually, and I don't have one in my book, so
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
that's even better.
We gotta go back to this one.
All right, let's see.
The one on the packet has 80,000, that's the request.
Is that the request?
Yes.
Yeah, I need the page
Okay,
eventually.
give him this. I can
I got
right
it.
now. I don't put that there. Is that a motion, Sean?
For the 0,
Zero fund legal.
one in the book.
How big is the reserve fund?
So we're proposing to appropriate 80.
Can I ask the question, I think we've talked, I know you've talked about it before, but just ask why it is that we only do the retainer rather than looking at what we're actually spending?
Wishful thinking, it's called.
There's a whole bunch of reasons why towns underfund legal expenses. It's kind of like snow and ice. It is almost always unanticipated that there'll be these increases because it depends on what lawsuits are filed, what adversarial procedures. It provides more control over the budgetary process so that the expenditure of money is more deliberate. And it also sends a message of expectation to the lawyer about,
That's the
here's what we're looking for you to do our legal work for. And if they come in well over, then we have a conversation with them, asking them to explain why they're over.
I just think we've been okay the last few years because we've had the free cash to transfer at the end of the year to pay for these things. I just worry when we know we're spending a lot more than 80,000 every year, in a year that we don't have, we've used up the reserve fund for other things, or we don't have the free cash to use at the end of the year. I just, when you go into I know we've talked about this before, but when we go into something under budget, we did it for police overtime for a number of years, and finally we put that in the budget where it should be a few years ago. And I know there's gonna be a discussion next week about snow and ice, that we've always
Which I see
deliberately
different.
underfunded. So
Well, that gets reimbursed. though.
Well,
I'm just,
It's not that it's reimburses, that there's a statute that
a lot
says
of over.
that you are specifically authorized to go over
It's
in
not all-
deficit
It's not all
spending.
our money.
It still goes against the trend budgeting theories that
that's my thought. We're okay now because we've had free cash or a large enough reserve fund, but if things get, if we can't cut back the budget this year and we're getting that much tighter, we really should know if we're deliberately underfunding something in a budget. It's like deliberately overfunding something. You don't want to do either. You want to be budgeting properly.
I mean, the way I always look at it is you're taking the money out of the taxpayer's pocket to fund that bill now on a hypothetical number or then on an actual number. And I've always preferred going with the actual in the end as doing it up front.
Thank you.
I think that's traditionally what most towns do with legal and snow and ice. They handle them the same way. And maybe the 80,000.
What if we niched it up
Right.
10,000, took it to 90 this year from 80 last year? I mean, that was sort of the strategy last year, right? Just to
Right, it went
move
up
it up a
some.
little bit.
Yeah.
Well, here's my concern about that. We've just heard there was 600,000 in the hole.
You can put that in the
And
book, yes.
legal is not one that must be funded as opposed to, let's say, Dover Sherborn Regional Schools. It's one that you can always catch up later, but you have to be able to do a recap sheet and show a balanced budget. So the more money you put into legal, the more you're taking away from balancing
we could
the
do
budget
zero
otherwise.
then.
I understand, I mean, I just wanted to have the discussion about it, that I think probably leaving it at the 80 this year makes sense. It's, like you said,
I'd rather
legal
see a
something.
realistic number that we can plan for, but I don't, you know.
The only thing I would say is it has to be enough to cover the retainer, because you have an agreement to pay a certain amount every month. That's planned for, you've signed a contract, it's not unanticipated, you know you're gonna spend that money. The rest, whether you get socked with a big lawsuit, that's truly unanticipated. You can essentially not fund it now and pick that up later.
As long as you have the money, as long as you have that money later.
I can
That's
say 22 years on this board, there's never been no free cash.
Okay.
We've always had pretty good free cash. We're always very frugal. We don't always spend all the free cash every year. We always carry forward something. So and the amount that we've been spending is well within the amounts of free cash that we've been receiving. So it's never been an issue in more than 20 years.
All right,
Move approval. Did we already vote on this?
we can vote on it.
I move to approve it at 80,
So,
mostly because I don't want to argue.
Okay.
But I'm gonna have the same argument
All in
in
favor?
5 days.
All opposed? Okay. So how'd you vote?
I don't,
Did you
I
vote
don't
for-
think he saw that one coming.
I was
vote
just
on
like,
both sides?
no, I haven't.
This is part of the education.
All right, you're allowed to vote one way or
I'm
the other.
gonna
on
vote,
first select.
I'm gonna vote for it at 80, because I
You're gonna
think.
vote for it. Okay, so
yeah,
3-2, support at 80. Okay.
Now, Paul's absolutely right, it's a prediction. Some might say a wild-ass prediction.
My prediction's 150.
Yeah, but.
What have
this
we
is not-
spent to
I won't
date?
tell you mine then.
This is not that different from what my clients do in private industry. It's, you know, good luck predicting what your litigation costs are gonna be.
That's right.
It's been pretty slow right now. No, it's not.
All right. Next item on the agenda is what?
The NOI for the recall of elected officials.
Okay.
So as I understand this, that the chair agreed to have some discussions with someone. Have those discussions taken place?
There are two items on here. One is a discussion about, let's go.
You said the recall one.
What's that, there's three, you said? No, there's two, I think there's two articles
There's this.
being held for recall-type provisions. One is something that Nancy Hess has supported in the past, which would address specifically financial officers. And the other is a general one, and yes, I've met with George Shea and Nancy to have some discussions. We don't have any language yet. We're working on some language. If it works out, we would put it in front of the board to see if it's gonna go on the warrant.
So why don't we hold on this?
I think we can hold on it, yeah, I think we can.
So are we done?
We're done with that. What else do we have? We have elder housing, supplemental fund. Do we have to do the capital stabilization
You
fund?
did this consideration
No,
of
that was
capital
the
items, did we
elder
skip
housing.
over
You did
that?
That was that one. Okay, great.
Yeah.
What about that consideration of capital items, did we have,
We didn't have any capital.
we didn't have it
items.
all, okay.
It's gonna be for you.
You gotta do the minutes.
Town administrator report?
Town administrator report. David?
Okay. Channel 4 was in town this afternoon. They interviewed the fire chief, Kinney, regarding the Patriots-Titans game. I think he-
Regarding what?
the Patriots-Titans game. I think he predicted the Titans to win.
He did?
It's a good thing he didn't do that in the interview.
The news team then went over to the headquarters this evening and got some other clips or predictions from other people over there.
Did anybody else support the Titans?
They probably should. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also,
Prediction doesn't mean support, by the
Right.
way.
Oh, it was just a prediction? That's it. No, don't make me question his judgment, Paul. I want to think he was just being loyal.
another note is at the planning board meeting on February 6th, there'll be an informal presentation of a conceptual plan for the Fitzpatrick property at 41 North Main Street,
What date was that?
February 6th.
At our meeting?
It'd be 7 PM.
Planning board.
Planning Board. Just some highlights of that plan. The plan may include an assisted living facility and up to a 30,000 square foot commercial development, and it would have on-site wastewater treatment plant, but that's the concept right now. And that was brought to me from Gino Carlucci, the town planner.
How many units?
I don't know how many units in the assisted facility, as an assisted living facility, and then a commercial space up to 30,000 square feet.
Retail or a retail office
Commercial
combined?
retail, yeah.
It makes a big difference if it's
Individually.
30 or 3,000
I said,
units.
well, 20 to 30,000 square feet,
Of what?
commercial space,
Okay,
not including the assisted living facility.
okay. And is it all on this side of the tracks, or is some of it on the other side of the tracks?
From what I understand, it's all on this side of the tracks.
And what are they doing on the other side of the tracks?
I don't know if
You know,
that's where the
either wells
wastewater
or
treatment
sewer.
will be or not.
Well, there were a lot of different things in play there, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, but I won't, Gino hasn't seen the plan either.
Oh, okay, all right.
It just.
So you're not
this is a
holding out
preview.
on this, you just don't know, okay?
No, I haven't seen the plan. No, I would have forwarded it.
Okay,
And then the consideration of payroll warrant.
okay,
Which is
so
just
we have
the
a motion
single-
on this. This is the payroll warrant through the 23rd of December.
I'm gonna recuse myself.
Yeah, okay. We have a motion to approve this, I mean, I'll move to approve it.
Second?
Okay, so moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Okay, opposed? Abstained? Okay,
There was no warrant in the packet,
it's
so,
right, oh, it was right here.
I
That was
just
not part of the
got it.
packet?
no. So I saw nothing.
All right. If you wanna look at it, there it is.
Well, it's already been voted.
Okay, all right. Next, we've got selectmen items. Anybody have selectmen reports?
And
Crickets.
wish a happy birthday to Sean Colleen
When?
today.
Really?
Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you, this is
Sean.
exactly how I wanted to spend it.
It's better than being at a town meeting, trust me.
Did you spend,
Well, it
did you
is,
spend your son's
except
birthday?
I will remind everyone it's my wife's birthday, and I spent
I
her
think you spent your
birthday here
son's
as well.
birthday here too, didn't you, at one point?
It's both of their
Pretty sure.
birthdays?
Yeah, I did.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh, wow.
So when's the next family birthday that we can schedule a meeting?
Yeah, you had-
Well, my daughter was born on Christmas Day, it's a tough one.
That's a
Oh,
tough
wait,
one.
no, I was working the entire time.
Jeez, that's right, you had a
right.
storm on her
Yes.
birthday, there you go.
She was thrilled.
If George, having won the election, would like to now follow the national tradition of pointing out that there was a lot of election fraud in the midst of his election, but
There were 6 blanks, so.
I think
highly
it was-
suspicious.
I think the thousands of people who showed up though for his first meeting, I think that was
I
actually.
think there were a lot of people from New Hampshire that came down
Yeah.
here to vote, so.
Excellent, okay. We do have, what else do we have here?
Minutes.
Minutes, okay.
Minutes. I'd move to approve, there's one typo on the second page, just to prove that I read it.
Okay.
The following information from the meeting may be viewed in the selectman's office, :
Okay.
that's my change.
I can do that.
Nice minutes as usual.
Thank you.
These were done by Amy though, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Do we have a second on
Very good.
any of these minute stuff?
Second on
minute.
approving the minutes, that's,
Okay, Paul's, it's been moved and approved, all in favor? Okay, fantastic. Do we have any other business tonight?
Do you want to set any meetings after January 25th?
We probably should look at early February and see what we've got going on.
Can we, I have a question about that, just scheduling wise. Is there a way, like we do with advisories, we pick a night and try to get on a schedule, not only for members, but people who want to come to the meetings? I think to have a night of the week that's, I think it would be beneficial for the town and for all of us to have a night of the week that we could.
You've been talking to Carol?
No, I'm just saying, I have a bit, I mean, everybody has busy schedules.
I think
I think
the
if we
thing
kind of
is-
knew
I think the thing is
in
the lack
general,
of
I know we have to be
predictability.
flexible, but it's,
Yeah,
I
I think it's
mean-
the lack of predictability of schedules on this board in particular, that once we get locked in, it's hard to do.
Yeah, I'm generally free on Thursdays, so I've been trying to encourage the board to meet Thursdays. But what happens is that different people have different conflicts that arise. And so then we are in the hunt for what other day of the week can we meet so that we would have a full board. That has been the process we've gone through for a year or so. We haven't been inflexible about it. So while it seems like the majority of times are on Thursday, you'll find things happen.
Yeah. Well, I understand that things happen, but in general, if we
I mean, I would say
if we said we
Thursday's the
could shoot
default.
for Thursday, if we know
Yeah,
that
that's
we're
what we've been doing, right.
default to Thursdays,
Thursday's the
and
default.
knowing it may change, that's,
Or snow.
So I mean, February 8th is the next Thursday. It's 2 weeks after January 25th. I would propose we schedule one for that date.
That works for me.
Works for you? Okay. And then two weeks after that happens to be the, 2 weeks after that happens to be school vacation week, and I don't know if people are
I'm
affected by
here.
that. You're here? I mean, we could meet that week too, 22nd of February. People want to put that down? And that gives us 2 meetings. How do people feel about meeting at 7 instead of 6:30?
I like it.
Diane doesn't like it.
Kind of heading there anyway, though. We say 6:30 and then
It's just impossible to get out of Boston. I
Yeah,
don't know,
it-
people come from Boston.
Yeah,
you guys get,
when you're coming from Boston to
it gets
Cambridge,
worse
it's
every
just-
year.
I spent
You
3.5 hours in the car today between morning and night. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Well, here's why the board got to 6 o'clock. We had staff that was staying late. We had visitors coming to us. And once you get to 9:30, 10 o'clock, to have citizen volunteers staying around, and they gotta go to work in the morning, all that kind of stuff. We had, prior boards had felt, if we have the meeting earlier, it's less imposition on the staff and less imposition on the public.
Except for the people who eat dinner at 6 o'clock and they have to miss dinner to come in.
Yeah, 6 was actually hard for people to get in.
I mean,
I think
Not just
seven,
us to
I mean, I was
make
on the
it.
planning board for years and we met at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock rather regularly.
advisory is always met at 7 o'clock as
7
well.
o'clock, yeah.
We're a 7, just so it allowed people to get home, potentially have dinner, and then come to the meeting. Or if you're commuting from Boston, to give you that extra time to get out here.
Yeah, but that's, in the discussions that happened in the past, that
Forces
works
us
for
to
the
be more efficient.
convenience of the members, but it doesn't work for the convenience of the public. And then when we made the change, the idea was we spend the first half hour, we're reading the agenda, we're taking care of all kinds of other things. And it's really like 6:30 is when we schedule, at least that was the practice. 6:30 is when we kicked into the hearings and the scheduled appointments. We never did anything at 6 for scheduled appointments. That might have been slipping during the last couple of years, but the idea was the meeting's well underhand, a lot of the stuff has been done, we're all functioning, we're all here, and then people come in at 6:30. You start at 7, you got people us not arriving till 7:15, 7:30, you have the public waiting, and a lot of people have kids, a lot of people have.
Most of them know if they do. Yeah.
Actually, for people with kids, it's easier to have the meeting later because you can go home and see your kids and then come into the meetings. Because your kids are gone by the time you get home, no matter when your meeting is, your kids are
Are
usually
we
in
the
bed.
only board that meets at 6:30 or 6?
The school committees actually meet
They do?
at that time. They meet at 6.
Yep, 6 is particularly tough. I mean, you almost need to be leaving Boston or Cambridge at,
I'm not going
3.
back to 6. I mean, we could stay at
Yeah,
6:30 if it works.
So we either
but-
hold at 6:30 or we go to 7 and see if we're not running too late.
yeah, my
I
preference.
know what Paul's saying, but we're much more efficient than they used to be.
Yeah, the meetings are
They had
much.
3-hour-long arguments that used to go till 10, 11 o'clock at night.
You can go home and
Well, if we
get yourself
cover-
some dinner.
Mike gets tired. He
I'm not coming
hits his
back.
threshold before 9 anyway.
If we covered
About when you start.
everything
tell
on
you
the
that.
agenda here,
Oh, I know
went
what
through
I'm
every
saying.
I don't know,
article.
Paul, you said it was a 7-hour meeting. I'm just going to sit here another 5 hours.
We spent more time talking about when to start than
I know.
Any other item?
All right, so we have 2 meetings though, right? I mean, does everybody agree on those?
Yes.
Yeah, what time are we starting?
The 8th?
We have, well, we have,
Seven?
we already have the,
16th.
we already had the 16th and 25th on the calendar, correct?
Yeah,
Yep.
February.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. I'm
We just went to
catching up.
February. We're
yeah.
actually 4 meetings ahead.
Wow.
Right.
Unprecedented.
Nice to see.
I'm
Start
watching
lobbing
this,
snowstorms
It's
at
the,
you,
it's
you'll
the
never get
moral, it's the moral era now. I mean, it's,
Was it 8 and 22nd at 7 PM?
8 and 22nd,
8
it's
and
You can,
7.
we're gonna be on
7
the
PM?
25th.
No, it was the
25th is Sunday.
8 and the 22nd?
No, the 25th of
25th
January.
of January. Yeah, the February ones, we were talking about trying to do at 7 and see if that works.
So February 8th and February 22nd.
Right.
Right.
7
So
PM.
it's 7 PM.
Start at 7, yep.
You guys are
Awesome.
crazy, you're that far out. But we're still talking January.
No, we're in February.
Nuts.
No.
How does this happen? What are they talking about?
Gives us time to bake a cake between.
You wanted to see what happens.
I'll bring in pasta for you.
We've lost all
meatballs,
our
can you bring in
unpredictability.
meatballs?
I love it.
What'd you say?
I'm talking to him, he says he's
Since
gonna
we
bring
have
in
more
pasta,
time.
so I
He was
said,
asking me, not
no,
you.
I'm gonna bring in whatever Diane wants.
Yeah,
Diane gets to decide.
We could make it a dinner.
Motion
meeting.
to,
We could get Barb Kantorski to make us cookies, right?
Yeah.
Did
We do
someone
a
make that
potluck.
motion to adjourn?
I was.
Does somebody want to adjourn? I'm just
I'll
putting
make-
our
I'll-
meetings
I'll
in the
move to
calendar so I
adjourn.
don't miss them.
that's what I'm doing.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded, all in favor. All right, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Sharon. Thanks, Diane. Thanks, David.
just one